we're back for episode 5, halfway through series 2 already, which is amazing. Today we're joined by Joe Stanley, who some of you may have seen in Farmers Weekly, and with his new book.
Yeah, Joe is somebody who I really admire for what he writes about, his social media presence, and his new book, which is Farm to Fork, which I have really enjoyed reading. So we're going to talk a bit about that, a bit about the seasons, because quite honestly, I had no real clue. When a strawberry's made, what is drilling, what is sowing, why can I stuff my face at Christmas? Let's find out. No, so do join us, and yeah, let's start episode 5. Okay, so thank you so much for joining us today, Joe. It's really great to have you on the episode.
No, thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here.
So first of all, let's tell and talk a little bit about you. So obviously people within farming know so much about you. You're obviously a really great advocate for the industry. But for the general public, can you tell us a bit about you and your farm?
Sure. So I've actually spent the last 12 years farming on my family farm in northwest Leicestershire. And over the years we've had, that's the farm that I grew up on. And over the years we've had dairy, beef, sheep, arable. But actually earlier this year, I actually moved from sort of what was effectively a very traditional family farming setting. I actually moved to another farm in Leicestershire, and that's actually called the GWCT's Allerton project, which is actually quite a different thing, although it's also a mixed lowland livestock and arable farm. It's actually a research and demonstration unit as well. And we do a lot of research there into effectively, nature friendly farming, which is really interesting, and trying to work out how effectively a profitable farm business, modern farm business, can thrive alongside a thriving natural environment.
That's really interesting.
I guess alongside that, this episode, we're kind of wanting to talk about the seasons. And that's massively important to have an awareness of that, basically, to get the conservation right.
That's right. There's, for example, supplementary feeding through the winter for farmland birds, for example. That's really important, and you can see that in the modern agri-environment schemes. And that's actually something that was pioneered at the Allerton project. Doing the research into working out, what birdseed mixes, growing in the fields are beneficial, but also, that filling that hungry gap around January, February is really important for farm wildlife. So no. Absolutely, seasonality plays not just into our food production, but also into the environmental work that farmers do. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. On the seasons front and the food production, lots of things that Lizzie and I talk about are because Lizzie asked the question and we're like, oh, do you know what? I bet loads of people are kind of wondering about that and asking that. And I think with the seasons for farmers, I can probably tell you when we started drilling, when we finished harvest, and my dad can probably tell you those dates for the last 5 or 10 years or something. But we don't necessarily consider the seasons more than just they happen and we know what goes on those times. But the general public don't necessarily. Lambing, they don't necessarily know when's harvest. It's only, looking out in the fields and thinking, oh, well, there are more tractors now. So a bit of a general idea of the seasons and what happens when, I guess, for the public, if you could tell us that.
No, absolutely, and it's not just, if you like, the general person out there with no connection to farming who doesn't necessarily understand the swing of the seasons. Obviously, we saw recently, for example, the Trade Secretary not understanding when British lamb is in season, and of course that's hugely important for the sorts of work that she's doing, which is always worrying. But no, from a lowland mixed farming perspective, if we're looking at it from sort of from my point of view, obviously, things like dairy farming, well, that's 365 days a year, in terms of, if you've got a system where you're trying to keep milk output constant through the year, especially if you've got a housed system, there's actually pretty much very little variation through the year. Of course, those who are based more on grass-based systems, of course, it's the spring and the summer where they're really ramping up their output. Of course, if you're looking, however, at things like arable farming, of course, autumn is the season predominantly for planting. Winter, things tend to go into hibernation. In the spring, they all grow away towards harvest, which then happens obviously in the summer when the crops ripen and die off. Obviously, lamb, our peak season, of course, is really through the summer and into the autumn, where British lamb, for the most part, really comes into its own. So no, the seasons are really important. But it's kind of almost in our modern life, of course, we've become disconnected not only from farming as a society, but of course, from becoming disconnected from farming and food production, we've become disconnected from those seasons. When we talk about, for example, global warming, I always say that farmers are on the front line of climate change, because we really notice small differences in weather. Whereas for most people just going about their everyday lives, climate change is still, I think, it's quite an abstract principle. Especially in the developed world, if you like, such as the UK, where you're really not particularly exposed to the vagaries of the weather. And of course, but as farmers who are really in tune with the seasons and with the way that the weather should be working through the seasons, we really do notice when those small changes do start to happen, and they can have a big impact on both farm food production and on wildlife. You start to see water dry up in droughts, and that's having a big impact that people don't think about on, for example, farm wildlife, if they can't get access to water. So no, seasonality is really important, and it's at the absolute heart of most farming systems.
That makes me think, sorry, Bex, I was going to say, that makes me think, why don't we instead of having a weather person on the news, I genuinely think, why don't we have farmers doing it? Because you guys are so in tune, what is what's a good day, what isn't. I think we should have farmers doing the news and weather.
Well, I suppose the problem with that is that you would never have a farmer saying it was a good weather day. I mean,
true.
It was a constant stream of bad weather news, so people might tire of that potentially.
That's kind of Britain, though, anyway.
Never happy. So in terms of the public's awareness of seasonality, why is it important? Because in some sense, is it just, well, they know when to buy which produce and in season, or do you think by the public not knowing necessarily the seasons and how they affect the farm, do you think we're losing the opportunity to attach the public with food production?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So seasonality is really important, isn't it? We've all become completely used to being able to buy whatever we want, whenever we want, at any time of year. And of course, without really stopping to think what are the implications of that. Obviously eating seasonally and ideally, locally, has big implications for, of course, things like resource use efficiency. If we're eating British strawberries, for example, when they're in season in the UK, well, odds are that they have been grown outdoors, in rain, just using our natural resources. Whereas if we're looking at importing those from other parts of the world, when they're out of season in the UK, for a start, there's a big transport issue there, and then of course we're looking at what are the resources that have been used to grow those in other countries potentially. I'm minded to think of a story I read in the last couple of weeks about obviously sort of the Almeria region of southern Spain, where they are massively now depleting their surface and groundwater resources in order to produce soft fruits pretty much all year round. And these are the sorts of issues that we're now starting to see in our food supply chain, in extended food supply chain. The longer our supply chains and the further corners of the globe that we're now seeing this food come from. Essentially, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. We don't know the impact that our food choices are having. Outside of our own borders. Now, of course, it's never going to now be the case, and we wouldn't want it to be the case, that we only eat native foods produced sustainably, within our borders when they're seasonal. That's a situation that really no one would want to return to. Of course, we have to be pragmatic and understand that people want access to a wide range of foods throughout the year. But I think, yes, that connection to seasonality has really, in many cases, been completely lost, and people don't have any concept of the impact of shipping food all the way around the world. Just so that we can enjoy, strawberries on Christmas Day, for example.
But I don't even know when strawberries are in season. Do you know, that sounds really stupid, isn't it? But is it summer?
Well, it's actually a wider window than you think in the UK. Due to the huge length of the country, and then actually the fact that we are now investing in this country slightly more in things like polytunnels. You can actually buy domestically grown, for example, strawberries for about 6 months of the year. It's actually quite remarkable. But yeah, of course, you see them coming in from, I don't know, Egypt, Morocco, Israel, long ways away. So. Yeah, no, it would be great to be able to really get the British consumer more connected with where their food comes from, because of course we know that this is a huge issue for many reasons when it comes to people feeling that they can support British farming. That frankly, that connection to where people's food has come from has in many cases now been lost.
Yeah. So obviously you've brought out a book called Farm to Fork, which I have here.
There it
And I
is.
really enjoyed reading this. What I really liked about it, first of all, is the fact that it really does break everything down into seasons: spring, summer, autumn, winter. And for me, because I don't come from a farming background, I found that really useful. But also quite accessible. So I didn't realize, there was different types of soils, that you have to rotate crops every year. I just didn't have this concept. I thought you had a field, you plant things, it grows, you harvest. And that's all you're taught really, unless you're in agriculture all your life. So do you think books like these are really important? Obviously, it's been really well received for yourself anyway. And yeah, do you think we should be writing more things like this?
Yeah, obviously, yes. I think that we really need to be connecting more with the consumer, with the great British public. They are our customers, and I feel that we need to do a better job as an industry of explaining why they should be supporting British food and farming. Now, the book, it wasn't written purely with the aim of, this is why you should buy British. It really was as a to try and get through to people the realities of just exactly as you've just sort of described. I feel that not enough people just understand the real basics of food production. Of course, if you don't understand something, then how can you care about it? And also, there's the very real risk as well that you have a misleading opinion of things. Again, if you don't get your information from the right sources. So kind of what I felt with the book was that if you went into any bookshop really now, there's always a table, isn't there, with books about the countryside and food and the environment. And there's always books there representing sort of, if you like, the rewilding element. It's effectively trying to say that farmers are responsible for all the ills of the world, and what we need to do is to rewild all our farmland and all our problems will be solved. And then at the other end, there's actually a very strong genre at the minute of upland sheep farming books. There's a lot of people out there at the minute writing really good stuff about upland sheep farming. But of course, that's very different to the majority of British agriculture, which is, for the most part, lowland, mixed, a lot of arable and that sort of thing. And I really felt that it was important to try and explain to people, where the majority of their domestically produced food comes from. And also, as you say, really going back down to the basics, the seasons, why do we cultivate? Why do the majority of farmers use plant protection products and artificial fertilizers? What is a crop rotation? What sort of crops do we grow in this country? Where does your milk come from? All of these issues, and hopefully it's an accessible way of explaining to people who really have very little knowledge of agriculture, where sort of the real basics of where their food comes from, and hopefully then sort of, if you like, make them start to think about some of the bigger issues around sustainability, around what are the impacts of the developments that we're seeing since 2016 with Brexit, now that we're leaving the European Union, and the Common Agricultural Policy, and to try and get some real public interest in the issue of food and farming and the environment. And because, of course, food and farming and the environment, especially, though they haven't been out of the headlines since 2016, farming has almost never been a bigger story. Every week there is a new significant development news story around food and farming. So it's great to try and, from a farmer's perspective, explain some of the big issues facing us as an industry at the moment as well.
Like, I think that's something, sorry, Bex, I've totally jumped in again, haven't I? It's one of those where it's something I'm definitely trying to be more aware of, is the choices I'm making. So for you, Bex, you tend to get everything really local, or, produce you make on the farm. Whereas, you know, I go to a supermarket, and whether that is choices I make from what I pick on the shelves, like I started looking at alternatives now, like should I be getting milk delivered to the door so we're not using as much plastic? But then it's like, who do I even ask? You know, so that's why me and Becca have these conversations, because, you know, it is getting milk delivered in bottles that you recycle and use again better than the store. You know, is it better for the farmer? Is it better for the planet? And there's all these questions that I think are sometimes used as headlines and thrown at us that you really don't know the answer.
And we've had this conversation with other guests and just between the two of us that it's not ignorance on the whole. It just isn't necessarily information that's really easily accessible and out there. And actually, I think farmers have a role in being more transparent. And I guess there's lots of programs and books, and when people share the realities, people resonate. That resonates more with people as well. So farmers have, you know, we can't put it onto other people to say, oh, well, people write bad stories or in the media. We need to kind of take the bull by the horns and you know, show what we really do.
No, that's absolutely right. And I think especially, say, take arable farming, you know, I don't think there's been anything really produced to try and explain the realities of modern arable farming in decades. So exactly as you say, where can a non-farming person go to find an understandable and quite simplified version of what goes on an arable farm? Really, all people ever hear about arable farming is that we use glyphosate, and glyphosate is terrible, and we must stop that. You know, and again, when you get to things like livestock, of course, the current zeitgeist, of course, isn't it? You know, we must stop livestock farming because it's the single biggest contributor to climate change, which is, of course, completely untrue. So no, you're absolutely right. And, you know, as an industry, I think we often do too bad a job of, as you say, being transparent and especially reaching out to people. You know, some people do a great job. There's some social media accounts that do a great job. Specifically, you know, what they're there for is to try and explain in simple terms to people, you know, what goes on farm. There's other initiatives such as, you know, Tom Martin's Farmer Time, you know, which is taking farming into primary schools, which is great. And then you see some you know, marketing campaigns sometimes done by AHDB or Red Tractor. But the problem with those is often they get a lot of backlash from the farming industry. Farmers saying, why is my money being spent on advertising to the public? The public should just know why they should support British farming. They should know why, you know, we're doing a great job. And that's, of course, not the case. You know, you get massive multinationals like Coca-Cola reinvesting 10% of their turnover every year into you know, into marketing. Everyone knows what Coca-Cola is, and yet they continue to do that. But we seem to think, as British farmers, that people should just automatically know why they should back you know, British produce. So as an industry, we need to do a lot more to reach out and to you know, and to be able to communicate our message, which is, of course, why, you know, Clarkson's Farm was such a great thing for us, I think, this year. Now, of course, that was just Jeremy Clarkson running off and doing his own thing for Amazon. You know, that wasn't done in coordination with the farming industry. It turned out to be probably the best thing that could have happened for farming and our ability to communicate with the public, you know, in a very, very long time. But of course, you know, that's the modern world, and it takes the power of a celebrity to be able to break through in that way. You know, my book is not going to sell as many copies as Clarkson's book, let's be honest. But what I hope is that it's doing the same thing, and it's just trying to bring the reality of modern farming to the British public.
Yeah.
Definitely. So, Joe, do you have a favourite season? And I mean, might be different from a farming and an away from the farm perspective as well. So, yeah, what's your favourite?
The most if you like, the most satisfying job I do on farm, I always find, is actually drilling. It's always been planting the crops in the autumn and seeing them come up, and then you know, getting ready for the winter. So for me, it's those, you know, long autumn days. But then you're also you've got in your head that harvest's already now over, and you're working towards a bit of a quieter period over winter. So for me, it's those you know, it's autumn. You've still got that nice warm sunny weather. You're doing a job, you know, for me, driving out of a field, having planted next year's crop in it, is always been, for me, the most satisfying. You know, for many people, it's harvest. You know, for many people, it's you know, lambing season or calving season. But for me, yeah, getting those crops in the ground and well established is with the promise of slightly shorter days to come over winter has always been for me. Yeah, that's been mine.
At least I can finally understand that. When I first had a conversation with Becca about what drilling was, I don't know how she doesn't just like giggle constantly.
Well, I do sometimes, some of them.
I just envisioned this huge drill, like going down into the soil, like planting things. But
Yeah.
it's not like that at all. But
Well, to be fair, I mean, we don't, if you like, make things easy for ourselves in an industry by using terms like, drilling. I mean, what? Yeah, exactly. What the hell does that mean?
yeah, so
You know,
it's
some
yeah.
farm. I know it's a bit regional as well. Some regions they'll say it's always sowing. You know.
Oh my gosh, I'd have been like needle and thread. I'd have been gone. So I think looking at the seasons, as you say, you know, winding down, kind of autumn time, looking at winter, I think sometimes people can forget is that actually farming is 365 days a year. Like you work on Christmas, you guys still work on Christmas. And I can't wait for Christmas because I get to be off, I get to have some time with the family, and I get to stuff my face with really good food. But I forget sometimes, and I think we should all take a minute to appreciate the fact that I can lounge on the sofa and watch a Christmas film and stuff my face with pigs and blankets and chocolates and, you know, whatever else because you guys work hard and you do work on Christmas. And we couldn't have that without you. Like, how do you find it working on Christmas? Is it, you know, all year round? Is it difficult?
Well, I didn't used to mind it, but now you've described your Christmas. I think that's what I want more than anything else. Sounds like a great idea. No, yeah, obviously there's, you know, some farm types can shut down for the winter. You know, to be fair, there's more than a hint of truth in the large skiing fraternity in the arable sector. To be fair, there's certain parts of the industry that can have a quiet time over Christmas, but no, you know, I've always had either dairy or beef, and yeah, it's a 365-day a year job. You know, they still need milking 3 times a day on Christmas Day, and it's probably, you know, frozen, and it'll take longer than it actually normally would because it's the middle of winter. But it certainly does add a different element to Christmas because, you know, of course, you know, my wife comes from a non-farming background, and her family's always had this very sort of this long rolling week of events. It's like a carnival of Christmas.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. For us, you know, Christmas is basically you get up early, you go and look around the stock and sort all that out. Then maybe you can get back in by late morning, get all the presents open, force down a Christmas lunch, and then go out and do it all again before it gets dark. But, you know, to be fair, you know, that's the lifestyle. That's what, you know, the vast majority of people within the industry, that's what they love doing, you know, and I guess they wouldn't have it any other way. So it's you know, it's a privilege to, you know, for most farmers to be in a situation where they are, you know, able to do that. And of course, it's, you know, what we want to do. We want to be able to provide you with your pigs and blankets. I'm not sure about the chocolate, but we certainly want to be able to provide you with that pork at Christmas. So, sorry, the dinging in the background is Ted, who's decided to take this moment to refresh himself from the water bowl.
Oh.
Good boy. Of course, he's always having to help out at Christmas as well, which is, I think he finds it a bit tedious, to be honest, at times. Perhaps
Can we
this is
see him?
Hey, Ted.
Oh.
I was going to ask about your terriers as well, because I have a Jack Russell and I wouldn't want anything else. He follows me around, you know, is a little shadow. So do yours come out with you all the time?
Yeah, no, they're great farm dogs. They, I mean, I know there's a lot of debate around what the best sort of farm dog is, but as a non-shooter, certainly myself as well, Jack Russells for me are the best. You know, you can get 2 of them easily in a tractor, and they can sit there all day. I'm not sure you could get 2 big fat black labs in a tractor, certainly not comfortably. So no, and of course, you know, Jack Russells, they're the best possible pest control you can have on a farm and all this sort of thing. So no. Jack Russells, we've always had them at home, and at the minute I've got Ted and Toby, who are 9 and 3, and I think uncle and nephew. But I think they mostly just put up with each other. They're not I think Ted's still a bit nonplussed after 3 years. He's had to accept Toby into the pack.
That's like yours, Bex. Herbie and Ralph.
Herbie and Ralph, father and son. They're the best.
Little duo.
They're great, and they're great. You know what? They are good. You know, dogs on farms are great. They especially if you've got a long day on the tractor or something. They force you to stop for half an hour and to go for a walk and clear your head. And it's great to have that company, isn't it, on farm, especially if you're frequently working alone. So they really do serve a really useful vital function.
So if we're kind of going back to things like publications, books, you obviously write for Farmers Weekly, which is amazing. But you're also really open online as well about the highs and lows of farming life and life in general, and definitely in an industry that can be quite closed and isolated. I think it's really refreshing to be able to talk about difficult topics and discuss what's going well, what isn't, and share that experience. How have you found that? You've got quite a good following online. Do you find that to be really supportive, or how is it?
Yeah, I think again, as an industry, we're getting a lot better at if you look at the whole mental health issue, certainly it is talked about a lot more.
Yeah.
Which is great. The extent to which that really cuts through to everyone in the industry, I guess, is open for debate. It's a great first step that we're now able to talk about it as an industry seriously. So that's really good. For myself, I've found that just when it comes to farming, it's great to just be as open and honest as you can about what you're doing on farm. If there's something that you feel that you can't, I guess, talk about or explain, then you probably shouldn't be doing it anyway. And I don't think that that's really the case with what we do in this country. So I think as an industry, we should be proud of what we do, of our standards. And that we should be able to talk about it openly, and again to explain to people, what the reality of farming is in this country.
Yeah.
I think that there's some sectors, especially where people feel scared to do that, and especially some of the livestock sectors, which is sad. You speak to people all the time who are like, oh, I'd like to be more active on social media, but I worry about the backlash, and
Yeah.
You do see that from time to time. There's been a couple of attempts, hasn't there, by sort of so-called animal rights activists to create campaigns to target livestock farmers, which have luckily come to nothing. So I would encourage people to do that, to be more open, and to try and share what they do on farm more openly. On the other side, I personally receive a surprisingly perhaps small amount of online abuse. I think everyone who works in farming gets some. I think some of it is then due to how you respond to that, whether you actually actively seek out confrontation, that sort of thing. And I would obviously always encourage people not to do that. Use your social media platforms, etc., in a positive way, and you actually do. You generally do find you get a more positive reaction, and in some cases, it's great to see the responses that you can get from some people. When you explain, the realities of what goes on farm, you often get people thanking you for doing that, and for oftentimes actually dispelling misconceptions that they might have. So that's great, and I'd like to think for every one person who takes the time to say something like that, there's 10 more who don't but do learn something. So that's really great. And no, it's great. You often get farmers sort of being able to reach out from it's an isolating business, and it's great, I think, as well, as I say with the dogs. It's great to have that company. I think for some farmers, having that little smartphone in their pocket is a great way to be able to feel that they're still connected to people during long working days, which is also a really positive thing. But no, I would encourage, not just on social media, but I would encourage farmers to get engaged as much as they can with people. Whether that's getting in touch with your local news media and asking them onto the farm to do stories. To be fair, local media especially, they're always looking for interesting stories. So don't be afraid to approach them. Write in your local parish newsletter or whatever. I got the job with Farmers Weekly because I sort of approached them and said, well, why not? And fair credit, fair play to them at the time. They gave a completely unknown young farmer from middle of nowhere the opportunity to have that great platform to talk about the industry. So don't think that that you can't do these things, because there's absolutely nothing whatsoever special about me. And I've just been sort of lucky enough to be given a number of opportunities to be able to communicate with people, but that is something that absolutely anybody can do. And I'm sure you can do it better than me. So someone should write in and suggest to Farmers Weekly that they replace me. I'm sure they do a much better job of it.
Honestly, your opinion pieces are such a great read, and I think they resonate with a lot of people. Do you think we should be then maybe tailoring some of our kind of content, not necessarily in Farmers Weekly, but as a wider farming community? Do you think we should be writing in other publications or getting the message out there to more of the general public rather than just farmers?
Yeah, and I think there's something in this whole thing that farmers exist in their own echo chamber slightly. I think that can be overblown. I think that I think most of the followers I have on social media, for example, are non-farmers. So you're not just talking to other farmers in that media. Of course, Farmers Weekly, yes, that is a farming readership, but absolutely, sort of as I said, get in touch with other media outlets and ask if they'd like some perspective from the farm. There's a huge array of stuff. I also write for a publication that the NFU does called Countryside, and that goes out to people who are interested in the countryside, in food and farming, and that's a great way of communicating with those people who've already essentially registered an interest in what we do by signing up to the magazine. And that the whole point of that magazine really is to promote British agriculture to the general public, and we do need to do more of it, as we've already covered. I think we oftentimes as an industry we just sit back and expect people to just understand why they should buy things with the red tractor on, and of course we spend a hell of a lot of time as an industry bashing red tractor, whereas in reality, from my point of view, if you were going to invent something to do what red tractor does, you'd probably end up with red tractor. So, I think we spend an awful lot of time sometimes navel gazing as an industry, and what we need to be doing is perhaps being more proactive and really trying to push our message to the public, because it's a positive message, and we know that the public react well to it. They want to support British food and farming, and we saw last summer with the furore that was created around the food standards issue when there was that mooted US trade deal. And we got 1 million signatures on that NFU food standards petition. So the public are really passionate about what they eat, and we just need to, and about the environment, of course. And we've got a great story to tell there as well. So yeah, we're pushing at an open door, but we probably just need to put slightly more effort into pushing, rather than just expecting people to understand why they should buy things with a Union Jack, or especially, of course, the red tractor on it.
Definitely. So we're coming to our last question now, which we do ask all of our guests. So I'm obviously the boots of the hosting duo. You'll find me in wellies, very rarely in heels. Lizzie, quite the opposite. But I guess the whole point is we're still both involved in farming and agriculture. So would you consider yourself team boots or team heels?
I think I'm going to say team boots, to avoid any wider confusion out there.
Oh, well, Bex, that puts you in the lead.
I think it does.
Oh, well, thank you so much for talking to us today, Joe. It's been great to talk about your book and to hear your perspective on the seasons. I think a lot of people are going to find that really interesting.
No, thank you very much for having me, and well done with the podcast. It's a really good listen.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Bex, I don't know about you, but I really, really enjoyed listening to Joe. I enjoyed learning about the seasons. I think it's probably good for you as well to kind of hear from a consumer point of view what we don't actually know, what we'd like to know, and how we can improve.
Definitely. I think it just shows farmers as a whole group. We've still got work to do, and we need to acknowledge that and get the work done, basically. But for anybody who hasn't read it, I'd really recommend Joe's book, Farm to Fork. And, well, keep your eyes peeled because we've got a bonus episode coming out very soon. So
I'm so excited for this one.
Yeah, you'll have to keep an eye on our social media, and all will be revealed soon.
Well, thanks again, and do give us a shout out on social media if you'd like to get in touch. We'd love to hear from you, and yeah, appreciate all of our listeners. Thanks, guys. I'm Lizzie.
I'm Becca.
And this is Boots and Heels.